one of the biggest challenges that we face in academia today is keeping track of our literature. One of the biggest complaints my students have is that they read stuff but they can never retain it, or like 6 months time they can't remember what it is they read, or they're always forever looking for the paper that they read. And there's just one of the problems is that there's just too many papers. I'm interested in plant phylogeography, and there are 45,000 results on Google Scholar, and so obviously we just reading that is going to take a long time, but remembering it and finding ways to remember it. What usually happens is we'll read something and we'll find a nice paper. Before we even read it, we'll find a nice paper, we'll put it into some kind of reference manager like EndNote, and we end up with these streams and streams of papers that are kind of nicely curated in EndNote, and then we read something, and then 3 or 4 months down the line we want to reference that, and we're like, wow, how did we, what was it that we read, where exactly did we read it? And it becomes really quite confusing. There are ways of putting your EndNote library or your reference library into different folders, or tagging it and whatnot, but it's still quite difficult to remember this. And part of the reason for this is that our memory is based on the physical world around us. Our memory has a geography component to it, and so everything just living on your computer screen, you really battle to figure out where something is that you read. Sometimes if you've read a book in the hard copy of it, you can be like, I read that it was kind of like in the first third, and it was on the right hand side of the page, and etc., and you can kind of use those geographical pointers to remember something, and you just don't have that in an endless list on your EndNote, or doing a Google search with the keywords that you kind of remember were in the article. So what I want to share with you is the method that I came up with that really helped in my PhD. By no means do I think it's perfect, but I do think it really helps with jogging the memory in terms of what you've read and when. So the method that I came up with was to print out my papers and put them in a file, but I didn't print out the entire paper. So what I would do, this is what my file storage looks like, is that I've got firstly all the different sections and all the search terms that I used, which would relate down to the different sections in my file, and I've probably got about 400 references in here, but this file is pretty thin, so that's not 400 printed out references. What I've done is I've printed out the first page of each reference, and then I've made space to make notes, and at the beginning of each section I have an index. So and then that index will be the short reference, a short description of what's in that paper, and then also an index, which will be a unique ID to that paper. So to build my, just to go over that again, to build my reference library, I first decided on what all my major topics would be, and obviously I added to it as it went on. You can see in very light writing here that I added some more methods. And so if we look at phylogeography of animals, I would then go to that section, and then I've got this index page that gives me a rough summary of all the things that I've read, and then I've got the title, the authors, and the abstract, and then space to make notes. Sometimes I didn't make notes, sometimes the abstract was just enough, but on other occasions I made fairly extensive notes about what was useful. And this really helped me, especially because every single cover page or these abstract pages look very different, and so I can be like, yeah, this is almost, sometimes even just the font reminds me of what was in the paper, or that this is the paper that I was looking for. And so this gives you the flexibility to store all of your major papers together under the different themes. But also what might happen is that one paper fits multiple themes. So here's nDNA, so nuclear DNA and the internal transcribed spaces is in section 8. And if I go to section 8, I've got a different unique ID. So this is nDNA 01 for everything in this section. And you can see it's a fairly extensive section because I wrote a lot about the internal transcribed spacer. But some of these also were animal related papers. They had to do with phylogeography. So what I could do is in section 4, which was my phylogeography section, is I could come and give that unique ID, nDNA 08, for example, in this cover index sheet, and have a quick, brief description of what that was. So I could be able to cross-reference papers that might be applicable to more than one section. And so by doing it this way, I could slowly but surely build up my entire reference list, have lots of notes all over the place in terms of what I read, and this really could help me. So if I needed to get to a section to write about it, in my writing, if I needed to write about a section, I could just turn to that in this PhD reference library, and I could then look up about it. And so also what I would do if there were very useful paragraphs or long sections or really good descriptions of, for example, topography, I just make a note to say on page 45 of this paper was this a really good description of how the topography of the Eastern Cape landscape looks. So I wouldn't write out the whole thing, I would just put a note to say this is where to look for it. And in this way I could slowly but surely collate everything and be able to reference it easily. And then also at the beginning of this booklet is I just kept one section just for some handwritten notes of things that were kind of planning and major ideas on how to structure papers that I wrote during my PhD. And so this kind of just gives you a little bit of a central spot just to keep a few notes. And so my entire reference library could be in one folder, and that really helped me keep my sanity. After my PhD, when I really got busy, I stopped using the system for a while, and I completely lost the ability to write because I couldn't remember things. And I've actually gone right back onto the system. I really strongly recommend doing it this way because of the physical memory that you have. You can know that somewhere, halfway through a section, or it was a very recent thing that you read and whatnot, so you can go to the end of a section to look for that paper. Whereas once it's in your computer, it could just be just about anywhere. So how did I go about making the abstract sheets for each paper? Well, I'd make a template which I would then copy and paste extracted images from each paper onto. So I make a template by first inserting some tables. So I'm going to insert a table here, and so you can use any design of table that you like. I rather liked being able to having two sections to the table, one where I would make comments, and then another one where I could just add some very brief notes. So if I was to have like long sections that I wrote about, that I could just have a brief comment about what that was all about. Let's make a few more rows here. There go. You can then prettify the table. And then when you're ready to make an abstract sheet, you can go find the paper that you want to capture. So here's one that I've read recently. So in Adobe Acrobat Reader, there's a file export to image option. So I just export all of these images to a temporary spot, and then I go grab that image, and I use Earth and View for this, but I will then cut and paste into the Word document the author, the abstract, and find the journal, paste in the journal, and you can even, if there are useful figures that you want to copy and paste into this that you don't want to redo, you can copy and paste those figures. So once you've printed it out, you now have a hard copy to make your notes on, and then you can add that into one of your sections into your file, where it's going to be placed within an index, within a section, and it's going to be placed in the index, and then there you go. That will hopefully assist you in remembering what you've read and what the important points were, and I really hope that that'll also help you write. If you have any suggestions or updates on this way of keeping track of your references and reading, please let me know, because I'm always keen to update the system. Cool, I hope it really helps. Cheers, thanks.